Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mark from the States. How are we doing today? I'm doing fantastic, I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate all of you. You know that I do. This has been such a fun journey. Learning new stuff, seeing new stuff. Just been an incredible ride. It really has been. Thank you. Today we're going to look at the huge amount of history on one London street. This is from a guy, History Lord, who I know I've done videos from before. I really enjoy. I please encourage you to go support his channel, as with all the channels that we watch, because they need our support. Help them, which helps us. Gives us stuff to learn from, right? Today we're here with Leo's behind me, Violet's right here off camera, and everything is peaceful right now. They're giving each other the eye, though, so trouble could break out at any moment. Who knows? Anyway, come sit on this big fake couch. You know the drill, and let's get into it. Huge amount of history on one London street.
Welcome to the History Lord. You join us here, and I'm in Covent Garden today, junction of Southampton Street and Maiden Lane, and it's Maiden Lane that we're going to be talking about today. But first of all, I want to thank you all. This is our 200th video on YouTube. We're also on TikTok as well, but thank you very much for all of your support. We do appreciate it, and there's only one last thing to say. James, roll titles. Welcome to London. So as I mentioned earlier, you join us here in Maiden Lane. And we're going to start off, we're actually going to do a walk through today, the whole street. There's about five or six different things I want to show you down here. First of all, we're going to start with what's in a name. We like doing random ones like this. So Maiden Lane, there's two theories of why it's called Maiden Lane. One is because at this end of the road here, just behind where the cart is, there used to be a giant statue of the Lady Madonna, and they think that's where the name came from. But that was moved around about 1857 because Queen Victoria didn't like getting stuck down here in her carriage when she went to the Vaudeville and Adelphi Theatres. So they got rid of it then, so that's fine. The second explanation is a little bit more disgusting. This used to be an ancient pathway called Maiden Lane. Now, Midden is an old English word for, want of a better word, a dung heap. Yes, this is where they used to put all of the effluent from the beasts of burden, and because this used to be part of the gardens for the convent. It was owned by the Benedictine monks in Westminster Abbey, and this was originally called Convent Garden. Over the years, it became corrupted into Covent Garden. Now, at this end, at the eastern end, we've got this Catholic church here. This is Corpus Christi. This was finished in 1874. I think the foundation stone was laid a year before that, and I think the architect was Frederick Pownall. I think that was his name, and he did have a problem because the unusual awkwardness of the site, and a few of the other buildings around here didn't like being outflanked by a church, so he actually dug down about 3 or 4 feet and buried the church in there as well. So there we are, Corpus Christi. It's well worth a visit. It's very ornate inside, as you would expect. Now, just behind James up there, we're going to walk down because just happens to be a very famous restaurant down here that happens to be the oldest in England. Okay. So this is Rules. This is the oldest restaurant in London. I think it's the oldest restaurant in the country as well. It was established in 1798 by Thomas Rule, and it specialised at the time in oysters, and then it became very specialist in British food, especially game. And I do believe they've got their own estate up in Teesdale, up in Scotland, that produce all their game for them. Now, Thomas Rule, there's a bit of a dark side to Thomas Rule. He was convicted of murder. He murdered his wife Isabella and his daughter Elsie. Oh, no. He was found to be insane, and he was sent to a criminal lunatic asylum. So it remained in the Rule family right up until 1914, when the owner at the time, Charles Rule, wanted to move from London to Paris. So he did a deal with a chap called Thomas Bell, who also had a restaurant in Paris. They did more or less a straight swap, which is rather good. The war came along in 1914. Thomas Bell went to war as an officer, so he left the head waiter, another chap called Charles, and he left Charles in charge. That'd be a good title for a show, wouldn't it? Charles in Charge. I don't know why nobody's thought of that before, but there you go. Anyway, I'm digressing.
I used to watch that.
It remained in the Bell family right up until, I think it was early 80s, 1983, 84, when it was sold to a chap called John Mayhew, and I think might still own it, or his family at least still own it now. Some of the famous people who've dined in here in the Victorian times include Charles Dickens, Thackeray, and in certain times as well, right up there, the most intimate table in London used to be Edward VII and his mistress, Lily Langtry, but don't tell anyone, just between us two. 20th century, some of the notables who've dined in here at the sort of like people like Laurence Olivier, Alec Guinness, etc., etc. If you're lucky enough to go inside, it's decorated with lots of contemporary prints from the Victorian era all the way through up to the modern times, including prints that and playbills that Charles Dickens presented to be put into his private dining room up there. If you think you recognise rules from films, you probably do. It's appeared in a couple of Bond films. I think the latest one was Spectre, and if you're a fan of Downton Abbey, it's appeared in several episodes of Downton Abbey. Now, we're going to go back on ourselves just a little bit, just over there, because we've got two things to look at. One is the Vaudeville Theatre, and two is what used to be there on a green plaque. See you over there. So those of you who've watched the channel for a while may remember we did a video all about Richmond Theatre, and we started at the back of the theatre going through the stage door. We're doing the same here. This is the stage door to the Vaudeville Theatre. Now the Vaudeville Theatre was designed by a chap called C.J. Phipps, and in 1870 it was opened. And I think the chap's name was, the owner was a chap called Richardson, who had a failed billiard hall, and he realised that theatres would make more money. So he had that built instead. The Vaudeville Theatre was a little bit strange because it was built behind Strand. The front of it is now in Strand, but when it was built in 1870, it was behind two houses down there, 403 and 404. It was in about 1882 that the owners acquired the front two houses, and by about 1889, they were demolished, and it was C.J. Phipps again who built the front of the theatre as we know it now. These days, back then it was 1,100 seats. I think it was 4 tiers. These days I think it's 694 seats, and it's over 3 floors. So stalls, dress circle and upper circle, and a few boxes as well. Now, it's also a rehearsal studio in here, and if you hear singing behind me, that's because they're auditioning at the moment. But this used to be the site of something called the White Wig Inn. And why was the White Wig Inn important? It's because of a little plaque up here. Voltaire was exiled from Paris in 1726, and this was one of the places he actually lived in London. So Voltaire, who was Voltaire? He was born Francois-Marie Ararat, and his pen name was Voltaire. He was one of the most famous French writers in history. I think it was 1718, one of his first plays, and that was Oedipus, the tragedy Oedipus as well. In 1715, he was exiled from Paris, where he was born, and he travelled a few miles down the road and then went back to Paris in 1717, where he was placed into the Bastille. Bastille? Is that how you say it? Bastille, isn't it, Mike? Yeah, we are. You're looking at me. I don't speak French, so there we are. Forgive me. You're nodding. Thank you, James. Thank you, Nate. Well, he's placed into the Bastille. In 1726, he was again placed into the Bastille, but only for 2 weeks, and then he was exiled to London, and this is one of the places where he stayed. 2 months before his death, Voltaire was back in Paris, and he said his farewell performance, or he did his farewell performance before a crowd, a production of a play called Irene. And he actually said to the crowd, "I die adoring God, loving my friends, not hating my enemies, and detesting superstition." He died in his sleep on May the 30th in 1778 in his beloved Paris. Now, next little stop, down there, and we go from theatre to recording, so this way. Now, believe it or not, in the recording industry, this is actually a very important street, because it was here in 1898 the first recording studios in Europe were actually sited. They were actually sited by a chap It's on the green plaque up there, but no doubt James would insert so I can talk about it. It was actually cited here by a chap called Fred Gaisberg, who was an apprentice to, now these names are escaping me because it's all music, and as you know, me and music don't really get on, so he was actually an apprentice to a chap called Emil Berliner. Now, Emil Berliner was the man who invented the disc recorder, and he also invented a recorder to play the discs on. That was improved by a chap called Eldridge Johnson, was the man who improved it by adding another more powerful motor to keep it running. And along with Alfred Clark, it was Johnson and Clark who invented something called a reproducer. No, I've no idea either, but there you go. That's how it was done. But Fred Gaisberg was an apprentice of Berliner. So he came here, opened up the first studio in Europe, and by their standards, it was extremely sophisticated. By our standards, it was very, very primitive. So to get the recordings, you would shout into a cone. So you'd shout into the large end, and the cone would put the music into, or your voice into the recorder. You'd be accompanied by a piano, and it was as simple as that. What did they record? Well, they recorded the music hall stars in London of the day, and it was very successful. Now, the gramophone company didn't stay here very long, only stayed here about 3 or 4 years, and then they moved elsewhere in London, but and they very successful. And I think it was in the 1930s they changed their name from the gramophone company to, what was it? EMI, and they're still going now, I believe. And in 1931, they opened their most famous studio, which is just a few miles northwest of here, near St John's Wood, and that just happens to be Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Now, what's next?
Okay.
Let's have a think. How about some murder, a mystery, just over there? So next thing we're going to look at, we're now, again, another stage door. We're at the back of the Adelphi Theatre. Now, the Adelphi Theatre is actually the 4th theatre on this site. The first one was opened in 1806, and this one dates back to 1930. And I believe the architect was a chap called Schaffelberg. What a great name. And it was all the Art Deco style. The vaudeville, along with the Adelphi, the Garrick Theatre, the Duchess Theatre and the Lyceum, back in the 1960s, along with Rules and all of these houses along here, were threatened with demolition because the Greater London Council, as they were back then, decided they wanted to redevelop the whole area. Thankfully, a campaign was started, and it was stopped, and that's why we've got all these preserved buildings around here today. One of the main instigators of that campaign was the poet John Betjeman, and he campaigned along with the Actors Union Equity, the Musicians Union, and lots of other interested parties, and they saved the area. By the way, John Betjeman was also instrumental in saving the Midland Hotel at St Pancras Station, that wonderful Victorian Gothic architecture that we have, which is now part of the Eurostar terminal. Anyway, I'm digressing. We're here because I think James may have in the background, there's a green plaque up here. So this green plaque here tells of a terrible murder, and that was the murder of William Terrace. Now, William Terrace was the stage name of William Lewin, and he was born to an Oxford lawyer, I believe, and after a short stint at Oxford and in the Merchant Navy, he fell onto the stage. Not literally fell onto the stage, but he became a stage actor. He was well renowned for his swashbuckling roles and his matinee idol roles such as Robin Hood, and he was also a very fine Shakespearean actor. By the age of 50, he was at the height of his fame, and he was working here, and I think the play he was working on was called Secret Service. So it was on the 16th of December that waiting in the stage door here was a chap called Richard Prince, who was another actor, but not as famous as Terrace. Now, Richard Prince also had a problem that he was an alcoholic, and he had mental health issues as well. Now, William Terrace helped him out as much as he could, gave him small parts in a few plays that he'd done, and over the years. Sadly, in one of those plays, Terrace had to sack Prince because he made a few remarks that were off the cuff and a little bit below the belt, shall we say. But Terrace looked after him. He actually carried on sending money, small bits of money to him via the Actors Benevolent Fund. Now, this particular, about 3 or 4 days before the actual murder itself, just at the Vaudeville Theatre, Prince was actually thrown out of the theatre. There we are, for whom the bell tolls. The Prince was thrown out of the theatre for causing a disruption. A day later, on the 14th of December, he was seen in the dressing room of Terrace up there having a very heated argument. And on the 16th, as I said, he waited in the stage door where he stabbed him several times. He was arrested,
man.
and the trial was a sensation, not just in London, but all across the country, selling newspapers galore. Prince was obviously found guilty, and he was found to be insane, and he was actually sentenced to life imprisonment at Broadmoor prison, which is there for the criminally insane. He died there in 1937, some 40 years later. Now, at the time, there was an outcry because of his light sentence, shall we say. The actor-manager, Sir Henry Irving, actually said, and I've got the quote here, the actor-manager, Henry Irving, said, "Terrace was an actor. The murderer will not be executed." So, there we are. Do you agree with that? I don't agree with the death penalty, but that's my opinion. You may think something different. Now, we've got one last thing to see, and that's just next door, and that's the birthplace of somebody else you may just have heard of. So our last stop today down Maiden Lane is here, which is now a pub, restaurant type thing. Does the usual fodder, burgers, fish and chips, etc., etc. Other eating establishments are available, I must admit, but there are. But there's a green plaque just up there, and it's to a very famous painter, JMW Turner, Joseph Mallord William Turner. Now, he was born here above his father's barber shop at number 21, and I think it was 1727. Don't quote me on that. You might have a look up there. I can't see from here what it was, but I think it was 1727. He knew very early on he wanted to be an artist, and he joined the Royal Academy of Art at the age of just 14. Now, he was described by some as the first modern painter. He used light and techniques that were brand new at the time. Most people didn't paint inside, they used studios. He actually painted outside in all elements and all weathers. He painted sunrises, sunsets. He used light. He was the user of light, and he liked to paint in the open air. He carried his paints and his sketchbooks with him wherever he went, and during his lifetime, he painted or sketched over 30,000 works.
Wow.
It's not bad, is it? Now, he passed away in Cheyne Walk in Chelsea, and he's actually buried in St Paul's Cathedral, in the crypt of St Paul's Cathedral, next door to the other famous artist, Joshua Reynolds. Now, you may see Turner's art every day if you handle money, because on the new polymer £20 note, on the back of it, on the reverse, there is his self-portrait from around about 1799, and there's also one of his famous landscape and ship paintings, the Fighting Temeraire, that was docked at Deptford at the time when it was being dismantled. This was our 200th video, so thank you very much for watching.
That's cool.
Thank you indeed for your support. We do appreciate it. And if you want to see what we do outside these, you probably know the drill by now, then go to historylord.co.uk, see about a walking tour of London, or have a look for James's YouTube, TikTok and website channel, and that's Last Line Films.
Okay. So good. I just dig it. There's just so much history in that dang town. It's just, I love it. It's fun. I love the little quirky history. People where they were born, where they lived, where they died. Murder. You know, the theaters. It's just cool. Very cool. I really got to get one of these walking tours when we go. I just think it would be so interesting, and I would love to either have him or Jules, of course. Jules, the guy's fun, but I'm sure they're all really, really good. So excited. I'm still probably not having until 2025, but I'm excited. Anyway, I hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Have you guys been on that street? Did you know any of that stuff? Pretty cool. I noticed they had a barbecue, and it said they had a barbecue joint. And what did it say? It said live music, barbecue. So I wonder if it's like a Memphis barbecue. It kind of reminded me of a Memphis or a Nashville looking joint. But anyway, take care, everyone. Bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And